Welcome to this edition of The Higher Estate. We have an amazing guest here today. I mean, we're going to actually learn today. Different than my usual. I'm going to learn too. I'm really excited because you got to continuously learn. I went to McMaster, and it's all about lifelong learning. And the individual who's here today has a lot of knowledge to share. Do you spread knowledge or do you share knowledge? I don't know, but we do something.
Take your
what
pick.
do we do?
Take your pick.
Yeah. They could be the same. You see, I'm already nervous because he's a professor. It reminds me of having to go back and sit in class, which I did sit in the front row.
Absolutely.
Of all of my classes because it was the only way I could concentrate for how many years? 12 years, 13 years. Listen, anyway, whatever it was, I sat in the front row when I went to school. All right, so we've got an excellent show that we're going to be putting on today, and we're really excited to have him here. I'm going to introduce him in just a little bit. First, we're going to start off with a little bit of our current events. We're going to split up some segments because, we're really professional on our show. And I have a goal today. This is for you, Mom. I'm going to try my freaking hardest not to swear, because you asked me not to swear and you told me that I swear too much. I will swear a little bit just because it's almost like a compulsive thing. I just got to get it out. But I'll do my best not to swear. Okay, so some current events. First thing, Ontario is seeking advice on vapor lounges and locations of using cannabis or using your medicine. You know that here at the Higher Estate, we talk about all things cannabis, whether it's medical or what we call lifestyle. And our goal here is to bridge the gap between the two in a concept that I'm calling, that's now being called? I don't know. Anyway, gaining traction, momentum, called, what is it called? Mindful consumption. And, hello. Oh, am I too close to it? I thought I'd give some bass, if I get close. Doesn't that sound better? No. Okay. Anyway, called mindful consumption. And so, we're going to bridge those gaps. We're going to continue to do that. And so the first thing we're talking about here in current events is Ontario seeking advice from the public on and the government, whomever they may be, on where people can use cannabis. Currently in the legislation, and thanks to Abby Roach, a Canna Warrior over in Toronto, who informed us that in the Smoke-Free Act of Ontario, they've thrown in vaporization, which means you can't vape outside, even though it's the safest thing for you to do. I'm not certain why it was thrown in, but clearly there's some backpedaling happening, or maybe education, and that's key. Clearly, the government is asking maybe some of the right figureheads now, some of the right researchers or clinicians on what is the safest practice, and vaporization is clearly safer than smoking or incomplete combustion. And so the question is, where can you use it? If you're currently stuck inside your house with your children, or and you have to vape in there, that's clearly not a safe alternative. Let's say you're out of town and you have to go see a doctor. You can't use it in a hotel. So I think we should be able to have vape lounges. I'd love to hear from people out there. Just send us emails. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and then we can talk about it next time as well. So I think that we should all be advocating for the continuation, of things like Hotbox in Toronto, which was, North America's first vape lounge. Thanks, Abby. Okay, second thing. I think this is kind of funny, and Andrew reminded me of that, is the 2 police officers who were suspended in Toronto for eating edibles. These were undercover police officers, and sometimes you got to dabble in your, reminds me of a movie where you have that undercover guy that puts the cocaine on his tongue to make sure it numbs his tongue at the end. Is that what cocaine does? Sandra? No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, okay, so so these guys were arrested, and not arrested, they were suspended, I think with pay. But anyways, way to go, because why not? I mean, if you're going to use any form of drug, you might as well use one that's pretty less harmful. And so I don't know what's going to happen to them. Anyway, what they ended up doing was they called for help. And one of them was found in a tree. He freaked out and ran into a tree. I don't know. Anyway, I think, I thought that was pretty funny. So something else. Lastly, in our current events, talk quickly about the passing of Dennis Perron. He was a Canna warrior, an activist in the battle for cannabis and its health effects on AIDS. He was a warrior in the gay community in San Francisco all the way from the 70s and passed away a couple days ago. And of course, our thoughts, prayers, and all that, or whatever prayers, believe in gods, this God, new gods, old gods. Reminds me of, what was that, Battlestar Galactica? There was the old gods and the new gods. Do you remember that? I don't know. Whichever gods you pray to or believe in, spirits, there's a lot of them. We're going into religion. We're not even talking about religion. Nice. I don't know. I'm totally off. I worked nights last night, people, so I am really tired. Anyway, our thoughts go out to the family, and thank you for doing such a wonderful job in the cannabis space and with the gay community and also with AIDS. All right, we're adding a new segment. And it's called Do As I Say. And I say that because it's do as I say, not as I do. That's sort of where it comes from. Anyway, I want to talk about probiotics today. So probiotics this is what a health warning. I feel like how Al Johnson and Joanne McLeod. Hal Johnson, remember those?
Yes.
Those TV. Right.
Body break. Yeah.
Did you remember Body Break? This is our own version, and it's called Do As I Say. Okay, so probiotics. Probiotics are good for you. They could be very good for your gut health. They could be important to rejuvenate or replenish the good bacteria. But one of the things I hear often now is, hey, I'm taking a probiotic, or I'm going to a nutritional store and I'm taking a probiotic, or I have my kombucha, because that's our usual thing. I'll talk about my hair a little bit. I am getting a haircut today, people. I know last week became a little obsessive. Mom, I know you didn't like the idea of talking about the hair, but I am talking about the hair again, because I don't know. I have a thing. So anyway, back to the probiotic. So probiotics can be very beneficial to our gut health and our overall health. The problem is we have over 1 trillion bacteria in our gut. And when you say the word probiotic, you say, hey man, I take a probiotic. That's like saying, hey man, I take an antibiotic. Well, what does that really mean? You have what bacteria are you taking? Which one's good for you? Which ones do you need? So I think here's the point. If you're going to take a probiotic, know which probiotic you're taking and which bacterial cultures are in that probiotic. Because what we see now often is side effects of probiotics. It's not all just harmless. You can get bacterial and gut floral overgrowth. And that's not good. That can cause a lot of digestive problems. So we have to be kind of careful when we say the word probiotic. I take a probiotic. Yeah, what are you doing? Hey man, I take a probiotic. So no, I take a probiotic for X, right? It's not just a general statement. Health is important, nutrition's important, but know what you're taking, know what you're putting in your body, know why you're putting it in your body. Okay, that's all I have to say about probiotics. Damn, that was good. Okay, current events, we're done. All this stuff, we're done. We're going to go on to our guest. And I'm really excited to have him here today. Our guest today is Professor Dr. Andrew Hathaway. He is Associate Professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at University of Guelph. And you know what's interesting? I'm just going to say, first let me finish introducing the guy. He teaches in the Department of teaches Criminal Justice and Public Policy. And we're going to talk about these things as they relate to cannabis. Most of his research is around, or not most of, I don't know, at least what he's published that I see, a lot of it is around cannabis and cannabis law, cannabis public policy, also about the sociology of cannabis. How do we interact? I talk often about how we interact directly with the plant and what the meaning of that is. And so I think Andrew, or Dr. Hathaway, how do you want to be?
Andy works for me.
Okay. Oh, Andy?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Andy, is going to talk to us and make us smarter about all the things that are important for us to become activists. These are the things we need to know. And how do we form public policy? How do we interact with the plant? How does the government interact with the plant that interacts with us? And how does that shape our view of ourselves? And how does it shape our view of drugs in general? And we're going to talk about those things as they relate to cannabis. I'm really happy to have you here today. And I haven't sworn yet, everybody. Like, this is good. I haven't, right? Clap. We can clap. And at the end, of course, we're going to take a card from Weedopoly. But we have a whole bunch of topics that I want to talk about, and I think it's really important, and it's a great time to have you here. First, I initially thought we'd talk about the history of cannabis, and we might get into the history of public policy around cannabis. How did cannabis, how did reefer madness, for example, happen? How did we start to criminalize cannabis when we've known for thousands of years, at least going back to prehistoric China almost. Like if we go back between 7,000 and 12,000 years ago, we know that cannabis existed and then made its way out to the rest of the world. And it was used for a very long time for ritualistic purposes and then also again for medicinal purposes, but only in the last 150 years in North America has cannabis lost favor until the last 20 years, I'd say. Even more so in the last 70 years. I guess 100 years, I don't know. 100 years, it lost favor. And why did it lose favor? And some of your topics are really important. But first, I just want to introduce you, Andy, and I'd love to hear about why you started to research cannabis in the first place. Like, what got you? Why did you start? What was the thought process? And why write those papers? And they're great, by the way. I've read some of the abstracts and conclusions. That's how that's how good I am at reading papers. Abstract. Yep. I'm a poor reader. I wish they had them on audiobook, because then I could listen to the paper. That's a great idea, people. Okay, so Andy, welcome.
Thank you. And
tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into researching cannabis.
What got me into the game? Well, like many young people today, I suppose I got through my undergraduate at University of Calgary, and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And, a master's degree seemed like the thing to do. And then, of course, the next thing is, well, what are you going to study? So it was a piece of advice I got at the time was study what you know.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I happen to know a few things about smoking weed and knew a lot of people who did so. And what really occurred to me, having gotten to know the literature a little bit at the time, was it was very much couched within this subculture of deviance framework. Classic authors like Howard S. Becker writing from the 1950s, when it really was kind of a marginalized activity, jazz musicians and blacks hanging out in the tea houses and that kind of thing, right? So the subculture of deviance angle certainly fit. It wasn't known to most of mainstream America at the time, and certainly not in Canada. And that didn't fit with my understanding of as somebody in the late 80s, where it was very much a mainstream phenomenon. We're going back, three decades now,
right.
And we talk about the normalization of cannabis now to the point where we're talking about legalizing and regulating.
Right.
Well, these were still early days, but nonetheless, it was clear to me that when you're talking about people who are otherwise conventional, people who are in white-collar jobs, middle class, university educated. I mean, that phenomenon was noted back in the 60s, right? That people from well-to-do backgrounds were starting to smoke marijuana.
Which is how I think, cannabis sort of gained its, or maybe, I don't know, left that even the word deviance, I mean, I kind of like the word deviant, to be honest.
Sure.
Left, or left the marginalized world and came into the mainstream world was really from a growing middle class. Absolutely. Where you had the jazz musicians and you had the marginalized community gaining traction and entering the workforce as tolerance, maybe as society became more tolerant, and we lost our bigotry and our racist sort of undertones that that developed in society, and people started getting jobs and moving into the middle class, those same people were using cannabis still.
Well, I suspect the law was never a problem until white middle class kids started using it. Kids whose dads were cops and lawyers and physicians and that kind of thing, and suddenly they're being saddled with criminal records for something which is understood to be relatively benign, right?
Interesting.
When the blacks were doing it, when the lower class were doing it, that made sense. This was within the realm of criminality. Suddenly we've got a problem, and of course that led to the Ledane Commission in the early 1970s, and the proposal to decriminalize, which of course got shelved, like so many of these reports tend to do. Right. So, I come into the picture in the late 80s, and not only is this something that white middle class kids are doing, but, it's not just the kids who were doing it in high school. In my recollection, the kids who hung out at the smoke doors wore the lumberjack jackets and the headbangers, we called them at the time. Listen to heavy metal music. I mean,
I don't know any of them.
That was part of the kind of the rebellious culture, right? It had that kind of symbolic
We always liked when the one teacher came outside.
Right.
Remember the one teacher that came out and had a cigarette?
Of course,
anyway.
There's always that cool teacher.
Cool teacher.
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
Sure. So, I in the late 80s at the University of Calgary, I noticed this was something that the athletes were doing, and the good kids, and it was a full realm of the population that really didn't fit this explanation that fit within this subculture of deviance, and this is a mark of rebellion, and all of the cultural marks of a subculture that it previously had. So I thought, well, there needs to be some kind of reconceptualization of this.
Interesting, because nobody was really looking at it from that perspective.
Right. And why not? Let's just take a big leap of faith here and actually talk to the pot smokers themselves about why they're using it, for what particular motivations they have for using it, what are their experiences, what are their patterns of use. And what I found out was it was very much no longer simply a group-based activity. People may have learned some of the motivations and learned how to derive pleasure and learn some of the techniques within that group context, but then it kind of took on a character of its own. Some people found it useful for, we're familiar with the leisure time, the recreational use. You think about the term recreation at its root is recreate, right? So you can imagine beyond just something you do to veg out by the TV, people are using it as a way to rediscover the outdoors, and as a kind of an accompaniment to other.
You were saying that you just sort of mentioned that it took it away from community. I find that cannabis is a community gathering event, almost the use of cannabis, but because you talked about it, some of your research, you talked about informed rules. Right? The sort of the cultural rules around cannabis use. I guess all drugs probably have a cultural or an informal rule that applies to it. We do this, we use it this way, we do it in this location.
Yeah.
And but so cannabis came from this, very dark it came from a very light place and was pulled into the dark and only became a problem, as you mentioned, when the white middle class, teenage kid was starting to use it in the 60s, which sort of led to this reefer madness thing. Not my kid. And but there was a community there still is. The community involvement of cannabis is really what, in my mind, and to those that I know, is really one of those things that makes it appealing to people, because it brings people together. The healing properties of the plant, the whole plant, right, is useful, not just a part of the plant. And what we saw, or at least what I thought I was seeing in history was, we have parts of this plant that are being used for its specific things, whether it was for ritualization or whether it was for medicine or for ceremony. But individual people were using it for their individual things. Where I find now is people are using the whole plant. As a person, we are a whole person, and they're using it for its different parts altogether. So I thought it was bringing us back. But you're saying that the community is, or the the idea of community or coming together is decreasing?
Well, I didn't mean to suggest that subcultural kind of flavor of it has disappeared entirely. I mean, it still has vestiges of that, and certainly as an ongoing criminalized activity, by its very nature, you are kind of cast aside and put within a particular group. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the medical context, I think that community aspect is all important. It's not just the provision of a safe medicine. It's the knowledge how to use it, that sense of support. I mean, I've done interviews with medical users who are suffering incredible stigma as a result of their choice of medicine. So that kind of support that's provided within that community context is absolutely all important. I was just drawing attention to the fact that it does take on more lifestyle type qualities and characteristics when people are not necessarily using it within that group context at a party or whatever. People learn to use it in ways that fit their lifestyle as an accompaniment to leisure, as an accompaniment to work. Getting into the medical realm as a way of adjusting to difficult circumstances, whether that be as an aid for sleep or appetite or all the things that you know so well as part of your practice,
So what happened in Canada that took us from a point of, back in the 1900s, we were using cannabis. Cannabis was recommended by healthcare practitioners, and it was recognized as a medicine both by pretty much all medical societies, the AMA, the CMA, all really recognized these things. But then we sort of started to lose favor around cannabis. What happened at that time that really took us away? From your perspective, that took us away from the medical use into this realm of, well, now it's this bad drug. I know we mentioned that the middle class starting to use it, or when it was no longer a marginalized and us versus them. When I know it's funny, I talk about cannabis in a couple contexts and looking at it, world systems theories, us versus them, and the haves versus the have-nots, and we find that cannabis fits into that same sort of perspective. What happened in Canada that sort of brought us away from the idea that cannabis was something that was super beneficial to the idea that all governments for some reason wanted to regulate this thing and criminalize it, and now only coming back to legalization right now? I mean, I know from my perspective, I think, but I'd love to hear what your perspective or your take on that kind of thing is.
Well, I think part of it was the scientific approach to medicine that meant we distrusted these more natural kinds of remedies, and we the gold standard of medicine and all those kinds of ways of verifying the efficacy of a substance, and the need to obviously something which is going to come up around dosage, and the need to have a particular very clear amount and pressed into a pill and those kinds of things versus more of a natural kind of health aid. I mean, I think we're rediscovering the value of complementary and alternative medicine in recent decades. I think part of what you're describing is that it was identified as a foreign drug. It was, we got our good drugs and we got our bad drugs. Our good drugs were tobacco and alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs. Our bad drugs were the ones that grew in foreign lands and were associated with particular ethnic groups or racialized minorities, and that's all part of the picture. It was criminalized in Canada in 1923. There were no reported seizures for about 13 years until the mid-30s. So we really have kind of a something based on.
What do you mean? So they I want to go back to that.
Sure.
Sorry. So they criminalized cannabis in 1923, but nobody really gave a shit. Sorry, Mom. Nobody. Fuck. So I was trying not to swear. I really was.
It's tough with this topic. I know. It is. Yeah.
So they're criminalized in 1923. I mean, I go back to the William Lyon Mackenzie thing out in British Columbia. That really started, in my mind, was the opium race riots.
Yes.
And where William Lyon Mackenzie was sent out there to squash the opium race riots, but instead of squashing the damn race riot, he fucking legalized. He closed down all the pro-herbal medical schools, marginalized the Asian population. Hey, Dr. Vicky, you get to use it. And so he criminalizes all of the pro-herbal medical schools, closes down or stops literally the Asian population in Canada were unable to be pharmacists until the mid 40s.
Right.
So what the hell happened? Why did something like that happen? How does that happen?
They called it the yellow peril at the time, right? I mean, it was this racist sentiment, which is suddenly blossoming again south of the 49th parallel, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
But at the time, there was a good deal of settlement by Chinese migrants who helped build the Cross Canada Railway at the time, who were willing to go down the mine shaft with a mouthful of TNT when white workers weren't willing to do so and lost their lives in the process and helped build this great nation and often settled at the end of the railroad, right, in Chinatown, in Vancouver,
right,
and prospered and built up businesses. Well, suddenly this didn't sit quite so well with those who feel that this was taking away from white prosperity in some way, somehow hailed as some kind of threat. So their habit of smoking opium was as a convenient way to criminalize and hence marginalize that particular segment of the population. So you certainly know your history as far as the opium prohibition in 1908 that set off the kind of the legacy of prohibition that we've been left with to deal with ever since. In 1923, somebody by the name of Emily Murphy is a court magistrate in Edmonton, Alberta at the time. She has a statue on Parliament Hill now. Known as a leading suffragette. So somebody who is known and quite highly regarded as somebody who fought for the right of women to vote. Well, another part of that history is that she was a bit of a racist, and based on reports that were coming out of Los Angeles and the United States, which associated the use of marijuana with blacks and criminals.
Right, because that was happening at the same time.
They were using these drugs to seduce white women, and of course that's a big problem when you talk about white national pride, right? Is like, we can
stay away from my daughter.
Exactly. So cannabis gets added to the list really when nobody knew anything about it. It really didn't exist in Canada per se. I mean, your perception that it probably existed in the form of medical tonics and those kinds of things that might have been available.
There were a lot of up till the early 1900s, like up to 1903, there were over 40 different medications that contained cannabis sativa, which is there's two types. If we break down cannabis into its subspecies, scientific lesson number one: cannabis comes in 3 different species.
The sociologist will shut up now and let you talk.
No, I want to hear the sociologist. No. I'm here we can bring a doctor in another time. We can talk about that. I want to know about the history, because in order to understand where we are today, we have to understand where we were. But cannabis has different species. So you have 2 types of cannabis sativa. We call it, and this isn't when I talk about sativa and indica and all these weird, those are just geographical locations on our planet. But there's cannabis sativa and then cannabis sativa L. Cannabis sativa is the one that contains THC, our basic cannabis sativa. The other one, the L, is like hemp, and that was the L is named after the gentleman that claims he's discovered it. I guess everybody gets to discover something at the turn of the century. Anyway, and that's hemp. So anyways, it doesn't contain the cannabis. I don't even know where I was going with that. I just figured that it was an aside at the moment when we were talking about it. Oh, right. So most of them contain, we were talking about the tonics. There was over 40 different patents, maybe 50. I don't know. Listen, I'm reading history, and whoever's his story, whoever's on the side of history that's winning gets to dictate how history was. So I hear the word 40, whether it's real or not real, I have no idea. But I can go back and look at these things, but I don't know what was buried, under in the sandstorm. But cannabis was used in medicine for a very long time, even in Canada, in North America. And we used hemp here forever. I mean, we imperial hemp was like until the mid 1500s. Actually, in the mid 1500s, all the way up until the 18th, 19th century, it was mandated for anybody who owned more than 60 acres of land in Canada to grow hemp on it, because at the time, Russia controlled the hemp, the world hemp trade, and we wanted to rely on ourselves. So Queen Elizabeth, whichever one it was at the time, had a mandate that anybody that had certain acreage of land had to actually grow hemp on it. But all of that lost favor, and you're telling me about that, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, it was really the white man who fucked it all up. I mean, what can I tell you? Like, listen, is that what it is? Is that what we did? Did we do all this? Is this our
Check your privilege, man.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Is that, did we screw? All right, you heard it here. I don't think we need to continue anymore. You know, just like, shit. Did it again. So we did it.
Yeah.
So we did it. What happened in 1923?
Oh, that's when cannabis was added to the list of outlawed substances in Canada.
Why? Where? Why? Why was it added?
Well, on the basis of the reports coming out of the United States that this was something that turned the Mexicans crazy. And,
right, because the marijuana,
marijuana,
the word marijuana.
Loco, yeah.
So you know, right? So what you know that? So what is that?
What
the
is
word
it?
Marijuana. Because that's why I don't use the term.
Okay.
It's a derogatory term.
Right.
Like you said, makes you turn loco.
Right.
The word marijuana derived from a Spanish term used in Mexico that they depicted this lazy knife-wielding Mexican who's going to kill your children, your white daughters.
Right.
And
right.
and somehow that got used. So is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, in the United States was a guy by the name of Harry Anslinger who started up this, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics.
Yes, he was racist as they call. He was the first. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when the Red Peril subsided, we needed something to replace it, so it became a war on drugs. Like how do we keep the bureaucrats busy? Basically, we've got all of this infrastructure in place by which to send out lots of cops to break down your door. If we're not looking for communists, maybe we better be looking for drug dealers or
right.
whatever, right? I mean, it fit the bill anyway, and clearly there wasn't much in the way of opposition because people could say pretty much what they wanted, and they had the power to make it stick. So 1923 was the start of it. Like I say, there weren't really seizures recorded until like the mid-30s. So we really had kind of the making of a law without a problem to substantiate that kind of intrusion into private rights or what have you.
They just tossed her in there. I mean, Harry Anslinger he was like this. He was a known racist. I mean, I think at the end of the day, he single-handedly helped create reefer madness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that from my understanding?
It was a little later in chronologically than Emily Murphy in the 20s in Canada. I mean, he was active right up into the 50s, I believe,
really?
In the United States in his role with, as the drug czar through various administrations, all the way up to, Nixon and his famous proclamation of the war on drugs down there, which is when things really heated up.
What happened? Why?
Well, it fit the political purpose at the time, right? How are you going to disenfranchise a major segment of the population? Well, you're gonna pick on something that is associated with them, whether it be the use of foreign drugs that aren't used by the rest of the populace. That fit the bill, right? So very much in the way that the Chinese came under scrutiny in Canada, we've got a similar process whereby how do you take away the vote from people? You imprison them, right? So we've got large
Can't
segments.
Vote in prison?
No, you can't. Large segments of the African population ended up in prison as a result, and you've got destroyed families, and it fit the bill very well. If you want to stigmatize and label a particular group for political purposes, the war on drugs has always served that purpose remarkably well.
Because you can put them in jail and you can't vote.
Well, yeah.
So our agenda wins.
There you go. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. Our agenda wins. See? Oh, does it not frustrate you? I don't know. It frustrates me. I mean, I see this bureaucracy. I see it in medicine. I see it everywhere. I mean, I think we've all been marginalized in our own different ways, even within, at least I have, even within the frameworks in which we work. But a whole population, interesting. It reminds me of this quote that I wish I can remember, where cannabis criminalization, I think was the word, was this thin veil of underlying racism. It was just like like you just said, the reason why cannabis was outlawed. It was racial. It was like a racial undertone. It was purely a racial undertone, and I wish I can remember the quote right now. I think I have it on my computer, which I may or may not have here. I feel like I want to pull it out. I'm gonna pull out this damn quote. Can you? Let's get my computer. We're gonna get my computer. I want to pull out this quote.
Let's do it.
I did this little history lesson-y thing. Can you pass me my computer? Well, I don't need the whole bag. Thanks, Vic. Dr. Vicky, I'm pulling out my computer. We're getting History Lessons 101, and then we're going to talk about stigma and marginalization. If you're already a marginalized population, what else are you going to do? You're just going to continue to do what you're doing and become more marginalized because you're stuck. How do I get it? Look at that. I'm now on my computer. Is this not recording, is it? I mean, you can't see there's nothing to see here. What am I saying? There's nothing to see here.
Be careful of that screensaver.
Now we're going on to my Gmail account. Look, we're pulling this stuff out right in the middle just because I wish I had it. I wish I had it pulled up already. We're gonna do it. We're doing it all here.
Just making knowledge on the fly.
That's it.
Yeah. Wow.
That's not it. That was it. That's not it. I want to get this quote because I think it's super awesome. Oh, I'm on the wrong email. We're going to a different email, people. So look at this. Like, it all happens here. This is what. Oh shoot! You see, now I logged out of my computer. I have no idea how to get back into my computer. Honestly, this is what happens. Okay. Well,
No one can say you didn't try.
I screwed the whole thing up. Mom, this is your fault for not letting me swear today. I blame you. She's gonna be happy though. At least I shouted out to her. So look, he cares about me too. You can, Mom. Of course I do.
I'll leave my mother out of this, but.
Oh, that's. Hey, anybody want to know how to make a butter? Here, what's this? Nope, that's not it either. Hold on. Please see. Here, what's this? Invention of cannabis. Da-da-da-da. Found it. Oh, but I found... You know the worst part of this whole thing? I'm such a... That's so funny. I could have just gone to my lectures. Instead, I go to the... Listen, sometimes I just, the whole thing came together now. I could have just gone to my actual lectures. Instead, I went to the recordings of it for some reason. All right, here we go. Okay, forget that. Here it is. Where is it? Where's my quote? I bet you it's not even in here.
Oh.
So first I have prohibition according to James Mills. Huh? I like that. Grew out of politics of empire rather than science or rational assessment. It's a great quote, is it not?
100% support that.
You do?
Absolutely, yes.
Here. Early prejudice against cannabis was thinly veiled racist fears of its smokers. That's all I was trying to say. I think
somebody's already discovered this. I guess we're behind the eight ball.
Hey, who said that? I don't even know. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
It's verification. We're not making this stuff up.
We're not making this stuff up.
Right.
So is that true? So that's happened. That's what it was.
Well, now we've got at least 3 people think so. We have
a movement. When you're sitting out there on your own, it doesn't count. If you have 3 people doing something, then it counts.
Right. No, I read all this stuff somewhere at some point. I promise.
But then you wrote about it.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, to the best of my ability, you got to kind of contextualize things. I think we're destined to repeat our failures if we forget our history, right?
What happened? So 1923 comes around. We Canada criminalizes cannabis. Then comes the 1960s and 70s, and we start doing science around cannabis. What happens at that point in time that says, hey, I think we need to revisit this?
Well, I mean, arguably the science was started all the way back, the time of the Indian Hemp Commission back in the late 1800s.
Can you describe the Indian Hemp Commission?
Well, this was put together based on the colonial experience of the United Kingdom in India, where, there's a long cultural history of the use
of... The ganja doctor came from India.
There you go, ganja and bhang, and, and the concern that arose around this foreign practice that wasn't commonplace within the empire itself, and the need to get a better understanding of it. So the research was done in terms of the physical, the mental, the social problems and harms associated with it. They came up with very little to speak of, and that's probably the first of the many reports that were shelved, where whoever commissioned the report didn't like the findings, so to speak. But this is
everything happened like that. Absolutely. Every commission we've had says that this is the last thing in the planet that should be criminalized, and yet they throw it away and they criminalize it.
Right.
I'm super I'm just super confused. I mean, I understand that we have that racism and politics have the are the reason why it was criminalized, but do we not now? I mean, I guess we're decriminalizing it, and I have to tell you, in the legalization world, and my thoughts around the way that we're legalizing it, we're just going into a more prohibitive state. It's not really legalizing it, where you can legalize it in a very, very, very specific way. It's not like, hey, we have alcohol, you can go drink it at a bar, you can go drink it over here, you can't get behind a wheel and drink alcohol. That makes sense. That's the safety issue. But we're not doing that with cannabis. Where cannabis, you can smoke in this way over there, in this one little space. We're regulating it even more than it's already been regulated, and I think that's one of the downfalls of of the legalization legislation that's coming out. But what happened? What was the political shift that took cannabis from a criminalization perspective in the all the way up through reefer madness, which we've now sort of defined, and I agree with you, it was based on the white middle class child, or my daughter, using cannabis, and we have to protect them. So you have the movie that comes out in I think it was late 20s, 30s, or whenever it was, demonize the devil with the cannabis, which then we call marijuana. Is they're gonna literally rape and kill your children because they use cannabis. It's like, and that was really that thinly veiled, underlined racist tone. Because
it was pretty explicit at the time. We could argue that it's an undertone now.
Okay,
because it's
let's argue it. The
root of all our prohibition had this very explicit, extroverted kind of racist tone. I would argue that it's more of an undertone now, because it's really the basis of it all to begin with, and we've just taken for granted that it is the way it is because it's been that way for so long. We were both, grew up in a society where it was criminalized. We were probably told it was bad at some point, repeatedly, over and over again. We had to discover for ourselves that wasn't so true, right? I mean, why are things changing now? I mean, I guess a positive view is that you can only sustain a lie for so long, and maybe we have a lot of people to thank for those who've been brave enough to step out of the closet and be open about it. Well, I mean, it doesn't take much to write about it. It does sometimes to stand up and admit that you use it yourself, if you're a person of social standing and credentials and those kinds of things, and every instinct in you tells me to shut up about this.
Right.
Well, at some point, integrity's got to take the day, right?
Yes.
And maybe this is starting to pay off, right? There's enough information out there that is being circulated, and people are starting to listen. A change of government doesn't hurt. When under the Harper government, we weren't going to see this happen. Obviously, that was a very dark period of drug policy. Trudeau comes in, and he's open to research and those kinds of things. So it's kind of hard to maintain the veil.
From our perspective, I'll tell you, from the cannabis perspective, at least the medical perspective. Oh, we're getting political again.
Yeah, let's do it.
Have to get there a little bit. It was a lot easier to practice medicine, and certainly to practice medicine under the Harper government than it is to practice medicine under the Trudeau government. But also cannabis specifically was a lot easier to work with under the Harper government than it was under the Trudeau government. Harper actually created the programs,
Right.
Whereas Trudeau's trying to throw away the medical program, pretty much, like saying there's no. I mean, they're taxing medical cannabis the same way as they're taxing recreational cannabis, which basically said, and there is no other drug in Canada that has a tax on. No pharmaceutical has a tax on it. They have a dispensing fee, but that's the pharmacy. There's no tax on a medication. But yet the Trudeau government comes in and says, we're going to tax cannabis, medical cannabis, the same way that we're taxing recreational cannabis. And I'm going to say, why are they doing that? So his response to that, Trudeau's response on camera, on TV, was, well, we're trying to wean out all of the fakers. They're all fakers. Everybody's a faker. That's literally pretty much what he said. Everybody is a faker. What kind of bullshit is that? I'm sorry. Oh, there, Mom. I've lost it. Fuck it. Out the window. I'm swearing. I'm back to my usual self again.
Yeah.
I get frustrated. There's use for swearing. Did you watch The Invention of Swearing? It adds like that.
Very valuable.
And you get passionate about something.
Yeah.
Okay, so what basically said is a doctor does not know how to do their job, is basically what he's saying. A doctor does not have the tools to wean out the patients who do and who are and are not using it for medical purposes. I'll tell you, over the last decade that I've been practicing in cannabinoid medicine, having pretty much started it, one of the original starters of the medical cannabis industry here in Canada, specifically around clinics, I've developed protocols to wean those people out. But you don't see Trudeau asking the clinicians, you see him asking his cabinet again. And so this comes back to what is the reason for this? One, tax dollars. I think dollars make more sense than racism right now. We rather make more money than be racist. It's probably going to get us further in the world, I think. If racism got us further, which it did at one point in time, because you can marginalize people and get what you need from them, which also became a money-making scheme, probably great, but it's pretty faux pas to be racist right now if you're a government in Canada. So let's make money. How do we make money? Tax. So we're going to tax, and I'm not against it. We've been arguing for tax dollars, tax cannabis, make it legal for the last 3 decades. That was the argument forever, was let's legalize cannabis, tax it, you'll make so much money. Okay, they're doing it, people, so we shouldn't argue about that. But we're talking about the medicine. And if you're going to tell me that I don't know how to do my job, don't come to me when you have a heart attack. Don't tell me sometimes it's okay to do my job and then sometimes it's not okay to do my job. Don't try to be a clinician or a doctor if you're not. I'm not trying to be a politician. You can consult us and I will consult you on political things, but don't try to play a part that's not your role. And I don't think it's their role to tax medical cannabis. By taxing medical cannabis, one, they're taking away from the notion that created our medicine in Canada, which is universality, which is access for everybody, because you're now putting another burden or a block in front of it. And two, you're saying a physician just doesn't know how to do their job. So that's my issue with the Trudeau government when it comes to legalization. They're not. It was a lot easier under the Harper government, who also understood medicine. That's just my opinion.
Presumably the association that speaks for you isn't doing a very good job in terms of communicating what you've just communicated to the federal government. Is that fair to say? I mean, I have or should we not talk about it?
No, we don't. Talk about it. Let's get there. I don't mind talking about that at all.
Okay.
I've been pretty loud advocate. About it. I'm not doing it in a distasteful way. I'm not using hateful language. I'm using fact. And we don't have a very good advocacy program within medicine to advocate for us. We have a group that, I mean, they some of them try. It's just pretty divided.
Fair to say that still you're in a minority in terms of openness among physicians to make this choice of medicine more readily available, or perhaps more would be on board, but it isn't worth the trouble and the risk.
We're talking about cannabis. See, I already was like, I love it. I went like totally off. I went totally off the mountain. I was like talking about medicine in general. But yes, when it comes to cannabis in Canada, well, when I started, I was basically waving my own banners. There was nobody else out there, and I was marginalized by everybody, the medical community, the government community, the media. I mean, you just have to go on the internet and you can see, I call it cannabis discrimination that took place. And we don't have a combined voice for medical cannabis as a therapy. This is going to bring me into actually harm reduction. So I want to talk to you about harm reduction a little bit. I know that you're the way that you think about harm reduction. I'd love to hear what you think about harm reduction when it comes to cannabis, because I know that for me, we don't have a unified voice, and there aren't enough of us talking about cannabis as an advocacy, as medical advocates to the government. The government, and even when we do, it's not necessarily, they're not really listening. They have and I think this may exist I'm sure it exists in all areas. They have their go-to people. Mm-hmm. They're the only people that they'll listen to. Most of the time, they're not on the ground floor, so they're not listening to what the people are saying or what's really happening. The clinician, they're listening to the researcher who doesn't really have a grasp on reality. And then they just keep perpetuating that instead of saying, hey, and I've written them letters, and I published the letters on Facebook in response to things. For example, I sent a letter asking about the taxation, saying what's happening with taxation. It takes away from universality. There's no other drug that's doing it. You're inhibiting other patients that are suffering. The response is safety. Do we have a safety issue? Tell me, throughout history, have we had, or in Canada, is there a safety issue? Where did that notion come from? Safety of cannabis.
It's not one that I'm aware of.
Right.
I think it's part of the prohibitionist mindset, right?
Right. Yeah. What is that prohibitionist mindset? Like what?
Well, I mean, I would argue you talk about harm reduction. You've already kind of fed into the prohibitionist argument. It's only half an analysis, right? What about benefit enhancement? I mean, we can't talk about benefits when we're stuck within that mindset where it's all about reducing the harms of drug use. So it's a bit of a problem to expect to have dramatic, movement forward in terms of drug reform, in terms of a harm reduction mandate. Part of the problem with harm reduction, from my perspective, is this claim for objectivity and value neutrality and all these. As a sociologist and a student of history, I don't think that anyone can be value neutral about anything. I mean, there's always a surrounding context and worldview that means values are always at play. And to pretend that values don't exist and we're going to do an impartial scientific analysis to reduce the harm is really only half an analysis, right? We're already kind of playing the game, and it's very heavily decked in terms of those who see drugs as nothing but harm. Of course, the truth is, people have used drugs for all time and for all kinds of reasons. And yes, there are problems associated with its use, typically in an immoderate way for reasons that perhaps are allowing someone to mask something that could be more effectively treated or dealt with in some other way, and that's harm reduction kind of plays into that. I mean,
you mentioned you mentioned something that's new to me. I never thought of it like that. Looking at harm reduction as a prohibitionist mindset. You said that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to knock harm reduction. I mean, when you think about it in pragmatic terms, it's like, well, yeah, of course. But then again, I mean, if you're not starting out with some kind of idea that people have the right to use drugs, then you're already kind of starting out within that prohibitionist kind of way of looking at things, right?
Wow.
I think you need a moral foundation on which to build pragmatic policy. right? The prohibitionists have always had a moral foundation, and just simply that it's wrong. So at some point, drug policy reformers have to take the moral high ground and say, no, it's prohibition that's wrong, and therefore we're going to have a far more balanced analysis than that's ever been possible under the existing system.
You've
right?
changed. Wow, beautiful. You've changed, like, just thinking about it. It's such a simple concept.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Like, I don't mean concept. Maybe that's the wrong word. It's like just a switch. Just think of it a little differently. I've always thought of harm reduction as we have to, if we're decreasing the harms of one drug, using a safer drug, that's a good thing, and it is a good thing. I think we all agree it's a good thing.
I'm not denying
that. But your argument, which I think makes so much sense, is just by starting the argument with the word harm, with the concept of harm reduction, you're thinking from a prohibitionist's perspective versus a more well-rounded, perhaps, perspective of saying, what is the real problem here?
Well, and if you don't have a worldview that allows for a balanced analysis, you can have cops say that they're practicing harm reduction by throwing people in prison. That you can define it any way you want. I think we need a definition that kind of accepts that people have the right to use drugs first and foremost, and then move on to reduce the harm, as people have always done within their subcultural networks of drug users from the beginning, right?
Right. And is it morally wrong to say that that people have the right to use drugs? I'm a physician. From my perspective, I'm not a prohibitionist. People have the right to make their own choices as long as they don't harm other people in the process. I think as a physician, my first goal is to do no harm. So I come already with a bias, which is do no harm, which is maybe a prohibitionist's mindset was built in there. But am I harming myself? Like, let's not use cannabis, because cannabis clearly is just less harmful than most other common drugs. I don't even you talk to say it's not a drug, it's a medication, it's a herb. It's, just using the word drug has its own, connotes something evil, right?
Is it fair to say, sorry to interrupt, but I mean the best analogy I can think of is when positive psychology came into being, right? Psychology always used to be about addressing pathology in terms of abnormal, behavior, ways of thinking, what have you. I mean, I guess medicine traditionally had that focus, but presumably there's a kind of a parallel to positive psychology where the emphasis is shifting towards more about enhancing well-being as opposed to focusing entirely on pathology. Is that fair to say?
I love it. Yeah. I just love that whole mindset. I think my mindset may even slightly be altered by you just saying that. I love the idea that, because yes, as a physician, my goal is to treat somebody's disease, right process. Right. So in that, even though as a physician in general, my goal is to enhance well-being, and preventative medicine is part of that, is that's our number one goal, is let's prevent it before it happens. Right. But oftentimes as a medical community, and me as an emergency physician, we were just talking about earlier on what happened last night in the emergency department. I have all these people coming in and they're all trying to die on you at the same time. Right. I don't have an opportunity to enhance your well-being at that point. My goal is to keep you from dying.
Sure.
And if I can do that, that's what I'm going to do. But at the same point in time, that's that mentality that I'm not looking at the rest of you as a person. And so that positive psychology doesn't exist. It's more of a PTSD feeling. It's more of, I'm going to keep you from dying because if I don't, I'm going to, that's the end.
We're talking about emergency medicine now.
I'm going all over the place. Man, you have my whole mind changing. Talking about emergency medicine. Sure. But if I bring it back, even if we bring it back into the drug world or into the cannabis space, the thought process of harm reduction, I look at it, I'm conducting a study right now. And the study showing outstanding results. We have those who have been enrolled in the study have an 88% of those enrolled in the study have decreased their opioids. 71, and we're in the middle of a massive epidemic of opioid use.
Yes.
But and so that'll bring me to my next question. Even is that is that something that's concerning? If everybody has the right to use a drug, do we care about a crisis? Is that me? How do we define a crisis then? But anyways, moving past that, 72% of the patients enrolled in the study have decreased their opioids 100%. From a medical perspective, that's harm reduction.
Sure.
I always thought of it as a positive thing, because that's the perspective of harm reduction that I come from.
Sure.
But when we use it as a general term of harm reduction, which I think is in a different context altogether, we're now talking about, I'm talking from a very specific medical perspective of harm reduction. And when you talk about harm reduction, you're talking about it from this sociological perspective related to, well, we have to stop one drug for another drug. We want to prohibit a drug for another drug. So from that perspective, I can see how it's a negative. But in my perspective as a physician, I see it as a positive. But how do we merge those two things? That's what we're doing here. How do we merge those two things? And you mentioned a shift. So what do we do to drug policy? What drug policy reformers? What do you think the goal is? And how do we avoid a crisis like an opioid crisis if all drugs are legal?
Well, I think you'd have to make a case that prohibition has ever been an effective way of dealing with the drug problem.
Right, hasn't, yeah.
No. So, I mean, do I have to argue further? I mean, no. I guess, I just want to caution against interpreting my argument that the harm reduction is harmful in and of itself. I just think it's limiting to a certain degree. And as you say, when you're in the ER dealing with a crisis situation, of course, it's all about reducing the harm. In perhaps your other practice in running a wellness clinic or that, I mean, you're looking at a more holistic kind of view.
It's a struggle. It's certainly a struggle.
So if you're going to address drug-related problems, you're going to have to get around to what it is that led somebody to use those drugs to begin with. And surely there was some kind of function or benefit that they're seeing from that use. I mean, you look at the most destitute person on the street suffering from, some kind of mental health disorder or something. The addiction to, some street drug may be, in fact, better than dealing with the hopelessness and despair that they're dealing. At least it's a way out. It's an escape. But we have to recognize that in order to deal with addiction, right? We have to realize what the motivation is to begin with. And half analyses that, well, drugs are bad, therefore we're just going to focus is not going to get us anywhere. Right?
But that's what we focus on. We focus on drugs are bad.
Right.
Because we call, I have a friend, I'm not going to mention your name because then she'll just get upset, who works in the rehabilitation or in the addictions world, but or let's forget that. Let's take something like Homeward or CAMH, or let's go to total abstinence programs.
Okay.
Total abstinence programs. I guess what we're saying is, let's say, and they don't allow cannabis in these abstinence programs,
right?
Even though it's less harmful than these other drugs. But I don't even know. I feel like I can't even talk about it anymore because I'm not giving it its full round view. If I talk about an abstinence program, for example, that says we shouldn't be using any drugs, am I now a prohibitionist? Is that what I'm saying, or am I saying you have a problem? And abstinence is the answer, because sometimes it is the answer.
Absolutely, for some,
right? But not for everybody.
It's not, and we need programs that are tailored to allow a range of choices for people for whom, I probably shouldn't be drinking, a Mickey of vodka every night. But if I'm getting some kind of relief from, smoking some cannabis throughout the day, who is anybody to tell me that, that's a problem? Well, from an abstinence-only perspective, that's clearly a problem. But I think, even places like Homewood have some kind of recognition. They've brought in harm reduction. They've kind of allowed for some kind of movement beyond that 12-step model, which, is based on a fundamental contradiction, of course, right? Is that drug use is a disease, and the cure is some kind of management of it through some kind of social means of group support. Well, in my view, if you're going to label something as a disease, then within the realm of a kind of a medical interpretation, then surely the solution should be something medical as well, right? I mean, I have a hard time getting over that contradiction. So, that's not to say that 12-step isn't the answer for some people. Better just stay away from it altogether. Better substitute some kind of lifestyle that allows me to focus all my attention on, going to meetings or whatever kind of way that allows me to get through. But there's a lot of people who drop out of 12-step because that doesn't work for them, right? So what are we going to do for those poor folks? I
don't know. What do we do for them?
What do we do? Well, we must allow for some kind of recognition of harm reduction, the value of cannabis as a far less harmful substitute, and accept the fact, well, this might not be perfect, but pragmatically it makes a lot of sense for this person.
So that's where things like high sobriety. There's a group in California that have a rehabilitation center called High Sobriety. So they use cannabis in their form of rehabilitation, which I think is excellent. So I think this is where cannabis does that full circle again. And, I bring it back to the beginning. We were talking about community, where sometimes, currently we may have been losing some community, but I think in the last 5-6 years, seeing the cannabis community coming together for things like a high sobriety, to allow something like that to happen, there had to be a political shift. And the shift is maybe there still are these underlying racial tones, and certainly we imprison half of literally skewed numbers of populations, which now makes sense for political purposes because you can't vote when you're in prison. And which, I guess maybe I knew that, but maybe I just never thought of it like that. And and so but I think that political shift is now is sort of changing. And so that's how we're having this legalization, talk. We're able to have that conversation now in the last, 2 decades. What do you think, final thoughts on what do you think the real political shift, or what the real motivation for legalization of cannabis was? Throughout history, we have on one side you have prohibitionists, the other side you have the non-prohibitionists, but you also have economists and you have capitalists. And cannabis spread like wildfire as soon as capitalism existed, and you had ships that could take cannabis plants to other parts of the world. But still, we went through reefer madness and all that crap that happened even during capitalism. What do you think the last 20 years, or even the last 10 years, what do you think that, as a final thought, your last shift was towards our shift towards legalization? Where do you think that push came from? I believe it was a patient-driven thing. It was a societal issue saying we've had enough. We understand that this is actually beneficial, whether it's recreational or medicinal, and the plant itself has, its own momentum and force driving it. But what do you think? What do you think that real shift was that brought us to where we are today?
Well, we could enumerate all the various stakeholders, and you've given some idea of the different context that clearly plays a role, but I hate to sound too cynical, but at some point, a government realized there was more votes to be gained than lost by legalizing cannabis.
Yeah.
That's simple.
That's simple.
Let's keep it simple.
True.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Okay.
It was, I do.
Drop the mic then.
That's all you really need to say before we play our last game of, I know you haven't played this game. It's fun. Don't worry.
How do you know?
Maybe you have. You're right. I made an assumption. I never played it. Listen, so I agree that even legalization, we came from a political spot, and the political environment has shifted, and so it's still a political move. And is it based on the welfare of the people? Probably not.
Probably not. Certainly not science.
It's certainly not based on science, or it never would have been where it was in the first place.
Never has been. No.
Right.
No.
What do you teach your first-year students? I want to know what's going on in that class.
Introduction to Criminology.
Really?
Yeah. That's that simple, that broad, and let's give them a broad introduction to the discipline. Let's give them an understanding of what different disciplines have to offer in terms of biological understandings of deviance and criminality and psychological ways of looking at it. Now let's look at how a sociologist looks at it with this broad understanding of context and the importance of understanding things within the human group and how that lends itself to understanding the subject matter. And from there, we can delve into all kinds of interesting topics, kind of like we've been doing here today.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, I think I would have liked criminology. I play on both sides of it.
I knew you would have sat in the front row. Anyway.
I would have, for sure. I mean, I probably even would have had one of those dictaphones. At some points, I was taking notes. And I didn't understand a damn thing that ever happened in class because goes in one ear, comes out the other thing. I'd have to go home and rewrite my notes. And unlike Dr. Vicky over here, that I remember when she was studying for her board exams, I think it was like a day before, I'm just going to look at my board exam. Oh, yeah, I just won the award for X and Y. I'm like, that's so nice of you. Anyway, I had to study my ass off to get to where I was, unfortunately. But at the same time, made me a smarter person. Okay, let's get back to this. Okay, so history. Oh, that was a loud clap. Was that a loud clap? Was that boom? Everybody heard that, I'm sure, on wherever, with whoever the hell's listening
Very
to
impressive.
This.
Yeah.
Thank you. My clap's a little louder. I mean different kinds of clapping. Anyway, okay. So my final thoughts all together, putting it together, I mean, clearly cannabis has had a really complicated and complex transition to where we are today, like all drugs have. And whether we should be legalizing all drugs or criminalizing some of them or not criminalizing some of them is complicated. But I have to agree that we need a I think we're going to find, like you said, a more well-rounded approach when we take away the idea of this is harm reduction. We're only looking at that prohibitionist mentality versus what benefits us.
Right.
Versus what harms us. So and that's really my argument with where cannabis research needs to go. We've looked at research. We've looked at the harms of cannabis forever and found relatively nothing. Yeah, there are harms, of course. Like everything, it's still a medicine. It's still a herb. Every medicine, every herb comes with its own list of potential side effects. So of course we have to. But we've always looked at these damn harms, and it's gotten us. It's great. Actually, I just wrote this little article because Bill Blair.
Got it in.
Damn, I wasn't going to say that. And fair enough. He's pro this cannabis thing, but again, what are we researching? Oh, we're going to open up 14 studies, and we're going to look at things like the harms of cannabis. Honestly, have we not fucking looked at the harms of cannabis for long enough? Why don't we do what you say and what most of us are saying, and let's look at the benefits.
Right.
Where's the wellness? And forget about the cannabis. Look at the wellness of the person. What benefits society? What benefits the individual? What benefits us to flourish and to be better humans instead of what's taking us down? If we keep looking at what's taking us down, we're not going to move on to the future in a positive way and maybe moving forward positively. Interesting. You're a criminologist and a sociologist who looks at the positive benefits of things. You don't find that so often.
Go figure. And, I don't think it's all that radical to scrap a policy that's never done any good. In fact, it's only brought more harm to people and society. So we're called the radicals? I mean,
right.
Really?
Really? Does that make any sense?
No, it doesn't.
No. Love it. Awesome. We're going to play this game now. That was great. We're going to play 2 cards of this game, and we're going to leave the board so that every time so that I can win, basically. That's basically what it is. I'm just going to move my thing ahead. I need the rest of the game. 1 second. We need that. Oh, that. We're going to, here's the game. Oh, hold on a second. Hold on. Oh, I also want to, there's a couple other things, before we move on, I'm going to, a couple other current events. Cannabis Retreats is coming up. That's a 6-day all-inclusive full cannabis experience in Malibu, California. It's going to be April 19th to 24th. You'll get CARE certified, so that means you'll be able to do my cannabis educational program through it as well. And it's a bunch of like-minded, community-based individuals, and it's 6 days of really just coming together in community, and it's going to be an excellent experience. And cannabis-infused food, and vape bars, and partying, and then also ceremony and yoga and meditation. And it's 5 days, and it's in Malibu, California, and it's going to be amazing. So you guys should check it out. Cannabis Retreats, otherwise I'll never remember to say it. Also, finally came out with our first branded baby elephant product, and it's a tea, if I can only pronounce the darn word. Oh, here, this is the game we're playing. Anyway, I'll just put it. Doesn't matter. Hold on, I'm going to kick it away. Where's the tea? I'm going to get the tea. Dun, da, da, da. Thank you. Can you see it? Were you not even recording? Are you trying not to talk again?
Yeah.
Are you trying to be quiet?
Yeah.
Shh, you're not here. There's nobody recording. Okay, that's the tea. Look at it. It's really cool. It's called Rooibos tea. Honestly, probiotics. They're good for you. Anyway, that's our and that's the first of our products. You can get it here at Synergy. So check it out, and we'll be selling it online. It's made in Canada, and it's natural, organic, and it's really good for you. Okay, that's all I got to say. Now let's play the game. So the way this game works, here we've got green. Where do we start? Oh, it starts all the way over here. Let's get rid of this tree thing. We're gonna play 2 questions, and then we're gonna be done. Hey, you want to play with us, Sandra? No. Come on, Sandra. No? Oh, I can't convince anybody to come in. Sandra, come on.
I have no choice.
Yeah, you have no choice. Yeah. Feed the social.
I won't be.
Yes, you will. Okay, are you ghost playing? Here, do you want to be pink? Is that too
No, come on.
gender specific?
Is that the only color left? Okay.
There you go. It's
I'll do
not.
orange.
Okay, beautiful. Sir, there you are. Do you identify as male, female, other, anything you want, so we can know? You know, we have to be culturally sensitive.
Absolutely.
I identify as human.
Beautiful. Love it. So do I. We're humans.
All right.
All right. This is how the game goes. We roll to see who goes first. I got a 5. You roll. You got a 6. Goddamn professors. And you got a 6. And social
You can
people.
go first.
A roll off?
And well, it's a roll off. No, there's no. Listen, we're competitive, okay?
That's right.
6.
Oh.
He still goes first.
Dang.
You know, the gods had it. So we roll again, and then we pick up a card, and we have to play whatever on the other side of it.
4.
You're red. 1, 2, 3. Oh no, we gotta go up there. Hold on. 1, 2. Go up here. 3, 4. Take a hit. You gotta take a card, read the other side of it, and do what it says.
Name 3 slang terms for a marijuana cigarette other than a joint.
Ooh.
If you can do.
Hold on. We need a timer. Do we have a timer?
Sure.
We'll do 20 seconds. Look, see, me, I procrastinate. I talk so that, and then I say start the time. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, 20 seconds on the clock. Go.
Go.
Spliff, reefer, blunt.
Okay, sure.
Got it.
Okay.
Oh, professor. All right. I'm horrible at this game. Okay, fine. Let's put the card on the bottom. And what did it say? Stay there or move forward? If you can do, then if no can do, then back 2 spaces. Oh, okay.
I'm staying put.
You're staying put. You're up.
I'm up. Okay. Can you just pass me the die, please? Thank you.
5. I'm gonna get a 2. Go up. 3, 4, 5. Busted. Spell the word marijuana backwards.
Oh no.
Look at the board if you have to. Fail and you lose a turn.
Can I spell it first on my phone?
No. 20 seconds. Hold on.
Hold on, I have the timer. Hold on.
3.
I'm just gonna pass this one to my.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know. I'm going too quick. Am I going too quick? Probably.
Yeah, no, you're
11,
good.
12.
ANAUJIRAM.
Oh, frick. Okay.
Got it.
I'll give it to you. I don't
Timer
even have a phone.
done.
Thank God I didn't have to do that. I have like a grade 3 spelling ability. But we save lives. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's that? Oh, bad brownie. I can't read. All right, duet. You like weed, and it starts with a W. Words that start with a W. Whoever has the last word moves ahead 3 spaces. We're all going to play this. W. All right. I get to start, so I get to start with weed. Words with the W. We just go around until you get knocked out.
Any word?
Any word.
Walrus?
Okay. Walrus.
Wish.
Wind. Is that a W? It's a W.
Why?
War.
Did you say? What did you say?
Why?
Wine.
Why?
Wine.
I'll use wine next time.
I just used it.
I said war.
Oh, really? You're such a sensitive person.
Weasel?
That's good. Oh, start the timer.
Water.
Oh, wind. Get that timer going. Get that timer going. We gotta get
20 seconds?
15.
Okay.
20's too long.
Okay, 10.
20's too long. We're
I'm gonna put it to
educated.
10.
Okay, 10 seconds.
Okay,
Web?
good. Winter.
Where?
Who?
What's going on? But really, what? No, what? No, I have to
What's
replay.
going
No, this has
on?
to start.
No, see, she's no.
Just the camera died. So, what is my word? But really, what's going on? I used it in a
Window.
sentence.
Wood.
10, 9, 8, 7,
Walking.
6, 5. Wall. To the windows. To the wall. No, don't say that.
Wedge?
Wedge. That's a good one.
Okay.
Did we lose video?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, but we're still on audio.
Audio. Yeah.
Is this
What?
supposed to be hard when you're stoned? I guess
Yeah,
is the
I
idea.
think so.
Okay, because it's not really that
No,
hard.
this is pretty easy. I think we're gonna get to stay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
your
that's
turn.
good. Oh.
This is our last turn. 5, and whoever is at the front wins. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. Take a brownie. It actually is pretty hard. Last week was pretty hard.
You have the munchies again. Name ways to cook chicken.
We had that one already. Next.
Well, I didn't. Oh.
Yeah, but I sucked at it. So you're gonna read another one. That's fine. We're done.
High and late for work again. Give at least 5 excuses for being late.
Okay.
Okay.
Is this with everybody or yourself?
Solo.
Solo. So you get 20 seconds.
I got stuck in traffic.
No.
Oh.
You're out.
Okay,
It's
bye.
him on his own.
Oh, I see.
Go. 5.
Dog ate my homework.
Oh yeah, you get to hear this all the time. I wanted the top 5 reasons you get 5 excuses that students give you.
I didn't have access to the course link.
My internet went down. Yeah, right. Okay, Starbucks. Yeah, I want to hear this. This is actually great. What are the 5 reasons? Top 5 reasons.
They don't even bother anymore.
They don't, huh?
Honestly, they just
No?
don't show up. No, there's no shame anymore.
Okay. So 5 reasons. Go. Dog ate my homework. No web link.
I was combing my luscious hair.
You're combing my hair.
How was that?
This is horrible. Where are you going?
Just change the
No, you don't need to change the battery. Why are you changing the battery? We have a camera. Do we need 2 cameras?
Yeah.
Okay, well, look at this. All right, we have to wait. Hi, everybody. We're waiting for a camera change. This is, what's the, what time is it? We're good? What time?
4:30.
Right now?
Yeah.
4:30?
4:30.
Uh-oh.
No more fun?
No more fun. Game over.
Game over.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming. That was a blast.
pleasure.
I've missed my haircut appointment. Wow, that went forever.
There you go.
Oh my God. Why didn't anybody cut us off? That was awesome. Thank you so much for coming, Andrew. I had an amazing time.
Likewise.
You're a wonderful guest, honestly. And we had a blast. This game we'll play another time.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds
All
good.
right, guys, don't forget to check all that out. It's 4:30. Holy crap, that went forever. All right. Bye. We're off.